this morning? Feels like we've already done like some mental jazzercise this morning, done some things. Super excited to be here with you. Before we go too far, I'm going to point out, if you know me, the obvious. If you don't know me, you think I sound like this all the time. I came back from our middle school camp over a week ago, and I was mildly sick, like half the students were. I blame them entirely. And then I was on the road to recovery, and then Wednesday took a nosedive, and I was okay until last night / this morning at 12:30 in the morning. It's fine. We were asleep. And all of a sudden, my voice went. So I will do my best to enunciate all my words, but I'm going to ask for a little patience, okay? If I stop to drink, it's because I think I'm going to die, okay? Just pray for me in that moment. I even brought up like the super Nalgene, like the efficient one today, so we'll see what happens, but super grateful. In the midst of all of that, I do just want to share, before we jump too far, a little bit of my joy. You've heard Heather talk over the last couple weeks about what God's been doing in our student world, and I just want to thank you, because it has been the greatest joy to go to high school camp a few weeks ago, to go to middle school camp over a week ago now, which is crazy, to head to Northern Ireland tomorrow, and I just want to say thank you. The stories of life change, we could spend a whole morning just talking about it, but the lives of students who are impacted by Jesus, and that comes from your generosity, and there's joy in that. Even specifically last week, we were just low on our funds for Northern Ireland, and we stood out at a table, and I watched you guys over and over and over. You guys came up to the table and you said, "We're in this with you." And your generosity was unreal. So I just want to thank you, because you are a part of what God is doing, even when you don't see it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Selfishly, also thank you, because I get to go and actually do some of these things, which to some of you sounds like a nightmare. To me is my dream. So thank you guys for joining me in that. Now, before we jump too far, I want to stop. And I want to pray. And I want to ask God to kind of step into a space and into a moment with us. Will you pray with me? God, thank you. Thank you for the way that you work all the time. Thank you for the way that you work at camp, the way that you work on mission trips. Thank you for the way that you work on a Sunday morning. But God, thank you for the way you work on a Monday and on a Tuesday and on a Wednesday. Thank you for the way that you show up, even when we're having a hard time seeing it. God, this morning, whatever we came in with, will you just meet us in that space? Will you speak light? Will you speak joy? Regardless. God, we love you, and we ask that you speak clearly. In your name we pray. Amen. So we've been talking all about joy. We're spending the summer talking about joy, which for some of you sounds really fun. For some of you that sounds like a nightmare. But what we're talking about is joy is this idea of well-being or contentment. Okay, it's this idea that we choose to say it's gonna be okay because God is good, always. Like this inner being within us, right? We believe Jesus is joy, and he gives us that joy. And so we've been talking about this, and I wanted to take a moment, because today it's going to come in a little handy to kind of make a little bit of a differentiation between joy and happiness. Sometimes they're together, sometimes they're not together. So I wanted to give you an example of something that I find great joy in. Every Sunday, I get to do something that is maybe the joyfulest moment of my life, okay? And you're thinking, go to church. No, okay? You guys are great, but on the way to church or on the way back from church, me and my roommate will look at each other, and one of us will inevitably say, "You know what today is, right?" And the other one of us will say, "It's crumble cookie day." Why? Because on Sundays at 8 p.m. on Instagram, Crumble Cookie releases its flavors that it's gonna have for the week. Thank you, Heather, for being my other person who enjoys this. It's like a big deal for me. And Crumble Cookie release moment is a joyful experience. It's something that I choose to participate in regardless of what's happening. It's something that brings a smile to my life, and even if it's the worst week or the best week, whether the flavors are good or bad, I have joy, because for that moment I can count on all these cookies being released. Now that's joy, kind of, okay? Although if you've had the cookies, you know. But the weeks where there's a cinnamon cookie, or the weeks where there's a lemon cookie, that's happiness, okay? That's the moment that my joy and my happiness come together and everything is fulfilled within me. But I'll be honest, most weeks it's just joy. I'm going to talk to Crumble about it. I need more cinnamon cookies every single week. But do we see the difference? Joy is a choice. It's a choice to participate. Whereas happiness is this feeling based on circumstance. And that is going to become important today because some of you over the last several weeks have thought about this concept of joy and you go, that sounds great, but you don't know how dark my world is. You don't know how painful my life is. You don't know how difficult my home is. You talk about joy, but what about? And the truth is, we have a lot of darkness, right? It's the phone call with that diagnosis. It's the breaking of our families where some family members no longer talk to one another and there's just tension and holidays are a mess. It's darkness in work or school not going the way that we thought it was going to go. We thought we'd be getting that promotion. Instead, we're getting laid off. It's those feelings of I'm just never going to be good enough. And then on top of that, you get things like mental health. You get things like addiction. You get things that just begin to make your world dark. And then you come to church and they're like, let's talk about joy. But joy and happiness are not the same. And it's true. There is darkness. And there's really kind of these three buckets of darkness that exist. There's the darkness of things that have been handed to you. Trauma that's been given to you, darkness of even ancestral lines of stuff that is handed, and you now have to carry the weight of that darkness. Things that have been done against you, regardless of your choosing. Then you have the bucket of darkness of things that we choose. We choose to pursue some things in the pursuit of happiness. We choose to pursue some things that make our world dark. This sin makes our lives dark. And then there's this third category, and we talked about it the first week, that there's an enemy out to steal, kill, and destroy us. And this third category, this darkness, is something that just exists that we can't necessarily fix. But the enemy doesn't want us to be people of joy. In fact, I think the enemy's biggest ploy is to say, chase after happiness, because that's the same thing as joy. And so we get these three categories of darkness, and they exist. And so then we come to the point where we go, okay, now what do I do about it? How do I solve that? How do I become a joyful person in the middle of all of this? And some of you are sitting in this room, and these buckets are full. Like, I'm just not even sure what to do with it. Well, joy is living like there's light. Joy is living like there's light. You see, the light itself is Jesus. The light is the one who gives us hope. But joy is living like there is a light out there, even if we can't see it, even if we can't understand it, even if we don't know it. Joy is choosing to live like it. The hope itself is Jesus, but choosing to live like Jesus, the light of the world, might give us hope. That's joy. It's a choice. But that's not super easy, is it? I remember I was working at a church in Arizona, and we had this cool youth room. And we decided to do an experiment one day with our students, which can sometimes go awry. This one went okay. We did a lot of weird experiments in that room, okay? But this particular one, we decided to black out all the windows, like black them out. We took duct tape and covered all the crevices of the door so that no light could get in. We went to our soundboard and put gaff tape on all the itty-bitty little lights so that no light in any part of this room would show up. And we started talking about what it's like to live in the dark versus what it's like to live in the light. And at first, we said, okay, we're going to talk about something, and we gave them a little bit of a warning, and then we turned the lights down. And pretty soon, we turned the lights off. Now, at first, you go, okay, my eyes will adjust, right? Like, eventually, I'll be able to see shapes and figures, right? Kind of like that moment when you're a kid and you have to turn the light off at the end of the hall, but you have to run down to the other end of the hall, right? Like that moment, your eyes will eventually catch up with you, but if there's no access to light, your eyes don't catch up. Pretty soon your eyes literally start to flutter because they can't make sense of the world. And you can feel your heart begin to race. You can't totally make sense of direction anymore. Everything becomes incredibly disorienting. And so you start to hear the students at first, they're giggling. Ha ha ha, it's dark. And then it's not so funny anymore. And right before they get to the point of panic, because I do love our students, okay? Right before that moment, we took a glow stick and we cracked it. And we just lit it in the middle of the room. This was it, just one small glow stick in the middle of this space. And all of a sudden, you can hear their breathing slow down. You can feel the room calm just a little bit. Pretty soon, just this tiny little bit of light, you can start to make shapes again. The world feels a little less chaotic. You see, the darkness, its goal is to disorient you, is to limit you, is to destroy you, but even just a little bit of light. The problem is, for us, with joy, we have to choose to live like this light exists even when we can't see it. So how do we do that? We start by finding the flicker. Okay, we have to find the flicker, just that itty-bitty little bit of light, because in your world it is dark and you're disoriented, and you just have to, at some point, just reach out for just that itty-bitty little flicker, and not happiness, right? We're not just going for the cinnamon cookie, we're going for a life that is different, and so you have to find this flicker, and I want to look at a story of this woman who, in her own world, was experiencing incredible darkness, and she chose to pursue and find a flicker even in the darkest of situations. In Luke 8, it says this: "Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him. They were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak." Luke does this thing throughout his gospel where he likes to put these stories next to each other. If he tells a story about a man, the next story is probably going to be about a woman. If he tells a story about someone who's young, the next story is going to be told about someone who's old. But he likes to intertwine to show that God is, in fact, rescuing everyone all the time. And so we get this picture of Jesus entering the scene, and he's somewhere that he's been before. They recognize him, and they're excited about his presence to the point where they say that they're nearly crushing him. Right? They're playing like bumper cars, but with their bodies. Like Jesus, everyone is anticipating and excited about him being right here, right now. And so they're all there. And this leader comes up and says, "My daughter, who's 12, is dying." This is a worthy cause, right? So Jesus heads out on his way to go and see what he can do about this man's dark world, this girl's dark world. But Luke then shows us this woman who's older, who instead of being 12 has been bleeding for 12 years. And you don't catch it right away, but her world is way more dark than the words can describe to us. You see, for her, she's been bleeding for 12 years, and I'm going to give you a little bit of science, and I'm sorry-ish, okay? When I say she's been bleeding, the word is hemorrhage, which means most likely it's some sort of period for 12 years. I can't imagine 12 days. Some of you wish it wasn't 12 hours, okay? But for 12 years, this woman is bleeding, is physically ill. Can you imagine after 12 years what her body would be doing? She would be pale. She would be weak. Just getting up in the morning would be a challenge for her. Her body is depleted. So she is physically in a dark world. But then, I don't know if you caught it, it said nobody can heal her. In the other Gospels, it says she spent all of her money just trying to find solutions. So she spent all of her money, all of her time, all of her energy trying to find answers to what's going on with her, and they can't solve it. Nothing is working. I looked into it, and back then there's like a dozen different remedies they would have tried. Some of them were literally inserting toxins into this girl. Do you know what that's going to do? It's going to impact her physically again. So on top of that, she's getting weaker, not stronger. Some of them were just superstitious things that they just tried, and none of them were working. So she's physically unwell. She's financially strapped. She's at the point where she's like, I've tried everything. Have you been there before? Where your world gets so dark, and you sit and you go, I've tried everything. And yet, for her, that's not it. That's not even the end. You see, according to Leviticus 15, there's also another problem with what's happening. Any woman who's bleeding is considered unclean. There were rituals to clean someone after their period that would bring them back into community. But for her, because of all of these laws, she can't be in community with people. She's stuck alone. So if she was married, her husband is no longer participating in her world. If she had friends, they can't talk to her anymore. She's literally living on the outskirts of the town, watching life, trying to find a solution, just grabbing at anything that could possibly do anything. And then you begin to think about, if that's 12 years, she couldn't be in the synagogue. She couldn't participate in the religious ceremonies. She couldn't participate in anything that the community was doing together. Like holidays, gone. 12 years alone. That's a different kind of darkness, huh? You see, you just kind of pass by it because Jesus is on his way to go save this 12-year-old. And there's this woman who, according to society, is basically non-existent. And yet, in the middle of her darkness, she hears whispers of this Jesus guy. He's been there before. Things changed when he showed up. Suddenly, the whole crowd is meeting up with him, and she goes, I'm going to find the flicker. I'm going to reach out for that little itty-bitty light. Maybe if I can go over there and if I can just touch just the fringe of his cloak, if I can just reach out, maybe something will happen for me, which was a big no-no. Culture would have told her, you can't come anywhere near people, especially someone that is known to be like a rabbi. And yet she does. She pursues the flicker. She goes into this crowd where she's not supposed to be. If anyone recognizes her, she's in trouble. And she just reaches out and she just touches the end of his cloak, which would have been this tassel at the end. And this tassel was actually a representation of his purity, of his cleanliness. And yet here's a woman who is dirty and outcast, reaching out her hand, and just the fringe of the cloak, she's just looking for that little flicker because she's heard that Jesus can do miraculous things. So she goes. An unclean woman touches the clean fringe of a leader that she's heard stories about. But she had to chase. She had to pursue. You see, joy is the choice to pursue, to find the flicker, to see the light, and to run towards it instead of continuing to hide in the dark. There's a song that says, "Hello, darkness, my old friends." She decides, I don't want that to be my friend anymore. What if I chase after and I just touch the fringe? Just a little bit of light, just a flicker. I don't know what she was expecting, but I'm guessing not what happened. But how many of us, we're living in darkness and it's disorienting. We can't tell which way's up, we're down, and the room is getting dark and our eyes aren't adjusting and we can't figure things out. And yet there's just a little flicker. How many of us turn away from it because it's too good to be true, or because what if it doesn't work, or because what if all these religious people are just crazy? I'm guessing there are some of you, even in here this morning or online, that you're watching people praise God, raising their hands, dancing, and you're going, what is that about? How can you have that much joy? And we begin to rationalize, right? We say, oh, those people are crazy. Because there's no way that it's actually that good. This whole Jesus thing is actually that good. Or for some of us, we start to question ourselves, what is wrong with me that I can't have that? Why am I so broken that I can't just feel free to do this? And I wonder how many of us are missing out on this flicker because we just aren't willing to choose joy and reach out. It starts just by reaching out. I'm even guessing some of you, as you're watching people or hearing about people, you're going, well, I would be joyful too if I had your life. Imagine if you had my darkness. I had a student years ago who had just the most joy could ever imagine. Like, she dances like a crazy person. She sings with incredible joy. Everywhere she goes, it feels like she's bouncing, literally. Her favorite thing in the world was like poetry. Like, literally, this is the kid, okay? And I remember seeing her, and it was easy upon first glance to go, just wait, kid. It'll get harder. Then we'll see if you're still joyful. As this student grew up and became an adult, I learned more of her story. And what I learned about her story is she knew more darkness in just the first 14 years of her life than most people will know in their entire lives. You see, she grew up in a home where she was physically and emotionally abused by her parents. On top of that, she had men who had exploited her and abused her sexually that were supposed to protect her and look after her. Then there was this one hope, this one woman who cared for her and loved her and showed her what light could look like. And upon having her, this woman literally dies in the middle of this pursuit of joy. On top of that, this girl, when she was young, her body didn't work very well, and she was stuck in a wheelchair for long periods of time because she could barely walk, and walking or running or anything caused her incredible amounts of pain. On top of that, her mental health battles almost took her life upon occasions. You see, just in the first 14 years of her life, she knew darkness. And then she got to high school, and she walked into a church building for the first time, not even to go to church. She walks in, and upon walking into that church, she saw the flicker. There was something. She couldn't quite put her fingers on it, couldn't quite understand it, but she said, instead of letting darkness be my friend, I'm going to choose to pursue the flicker. And so she showed up that next Sunday, and the next Sunday, and the next Sunday. Without her family, she just kept coming. And over the course of a couple months, she met Jesus as her own, and she decided she was going to get baptized, and something in her world changed, but it started with a flicker. It starts with just chasing the little bit of light, because just a little bit of light can take that disorientation and help us make sense of the world again. And her world isn't light now. She still experiences darkness, and yet she chooses to always chase after this, Jesus. And I know that can sound super simplistic, but maybe some of us have been overly cynical, and it's time for us to just try. To just say yes to the flicker. And it's not magic. It's not like you say yes to Jesus and instantly everything just makes sense in your world, but suddenly things begin to. We get to choose to live like there's light and to chase after the little flicker. So then what? Okay, we found the flicker. We got it. Now what do we do? Is that just it? We're just chasing little flickers for the rest of our life? No, because I think that's actually what we think we're doing when we're chasing happiness. We're just going to chase one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. What do we do instead? We stay in the glow. We stay in the glow. It's one thing to chase it down. It's another thing to be willing to just stay put once you find it. Once you see him, once you experience him, even if it doesn't fully make sense, you stay put. And this is not easy. Why? Because while it's helping make sense of the rest of the world, it's also shining light on our own lives. And sometimes we're not ready for the world to see that, huh? I don't know that I want everyone to see this darkness. I'm good if it's over here, but up here, no. Stay in the glow. For this woman, there's this moment that changes everything for her. In verse 44, it says, she came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. Who touched me? Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. But Jesus said, someone touched me, and I know that power has gone out from me. Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. I can't help but like picture this moment, right? She comes and she doesn't want to get caught. You don't want to talk about this. She's not supposed to be there. So she comes almost just like reach out. But the moment you reach out, you're physically instantly healed. Like that's miraculous enough. And that happens. But the moment that happens, Jesus, who's on his way to save a 12-year-old girl, stops and steps back. Doesn't your heart sink just a little bit? Uh-oh. What are we going to do? And he says, like, hey, someone did something. Like, this, we need to pause. And everyone's like, ha, you're surrounded by people, right? Not taking him seriously. But she knows. She has a choice in this moment. She just touched the light and got to experience the light. And it is powerful and healing. And it will do more for us than we can ever even ask or imagine. And she has a choice. She can stay put or she can get out of there. How many of us want to get out of there? I would. I don't want to stand up in front of him and now have a conversation about what just happened. But she doesn't. She stays in the glow. She doesn't know. Honestly, it appears as if she's afraid that she's going to be met with shame. How many of us, the first time we experience God's light, we think what's on the other side of it is shame. We think that the rug is going to be pulled out from underneath us and that grace isn't actually that good. And yet she stands there and she goes, okay, let me tell you what happened. People would have known who she is. They would have known her story. And she tells the story, well, I've been sick and I just thought maybe the flicker, just this little glimmer of light could do something for me. And when I touched you, I was better and then you stopped and here we are. And she stayed in the glow. I think for a lot of us, when we experience Jesus, we love it, right? It's powerful. And then we go, okay, but now's the part where people start to see what's happening. And we have to own our own darkness. We have to let God actually do the things. She shares her story, all of it, in this one moment. Why? Because she's standing in the light. And when our world is dark, what our heads say is just get back in the darkness. It's safe. At least I know what's back there. I know what to expect, and instead she stays put, and we need to become people that stay put, so all of a sudden light can cover all of us. Everything about us is out in the open. Nothing is hidden, and that's terrifying and beautiful, because when that happens, God can change things. But when our world is dark, I think the enemy's lie is you're safer back there, because out here people are going to see, people are going to know. We're going to know what's really going on at home. Instead, he says, listen, stay put. Stay there. Talk about it. Open up. There's a condition in the American church that I've seen since I was a kid. I was a pro at it as a kid. There's this condition that says if we play the part, people will think we're good Christians. What if we stopped doing that and actually became people that just stayed in that light? And let God do something. Could you imagine? Could you imagine what your home life would be like if we didn't pretend that everything was okay, but we actually talked about the darkness? You see, the crazy thing that the enemy knows is that if we think our world is dark and he keeps us there, we think that if we say it out loud, it's going to get worse. It never does. Putting things in the light is the only way to make it better, but you have to stay put. Because otherwise we become people who we go, oh, a little bit of light, I'll take that. Okay, I'm out. Oh, a little bit of light, I'll take that. Okay, I'm out. Then we think we need things like going to summer camp to make our faith better. We think we need things like a really good Sunday morning worship set to make our faith better. We think that we just need a really good devotional and then our lives will be better. Instead of just trying to touch the light occasionally, what if we just stayed there, even if we're feeling dark, and we let the light do something? You see, joy is choosing to stay put, even when things don't make sense. It's choosing to live in the light. So for this woman, she does. She comes forward and she thinks she's going to be met with a reprimand, right? She just took some of Jesus's power. She's going to be met with shame. She's hesitant to even get up there, but I don't know if you caught it. She stood up into that space and said, here's what's happening. And the cool thing is, when we choose to chase this down, to pursue this flicker, when we choose to stay put, what comes next is we get to be the light. Pretty soon we go from being people of darkness to being people of light. For her in this moment, it was amazing, right? She's healed. Things are amazing. She's not sure if what Jesus is going to do in this moment. But what he does is way more than just heal her. He says in verse 48, then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." Daughter. He looked at her, and instead of calling her shunned or outcast or shame or broken or darkness, he said, "Daughter." It's the only time Jesus ever uses that word to talk about anybody. Right? He was on the way to go heal this 12-year-old daughter, and he stops in that moment and he looks at her and he says, "My child, you're mine. You are now the light." You see, here's the thing about this story that I don't think I fully grasped as like a kid, right? It's, yay, she's healed and she's all good, but she's standing there. Her whole story is out for the world. All of the darkness is on display. People could have known who she was just simply because she was an outcast in this culture. And all of this is just open. There's a crowd. Remember, they're playing bumper cars with their bodies in the middle of this. There's just people everywhere. And Jesus stops and looks at her, and she shares all of her darkness, and in sharing all of her darkness, Jesus looks at her as the light, and he calls her his own, and now she's the light. All of these people who before were like, "Get away from me, don't talk to me," now know that she belongs. She's with them. All of them. You see, so many of us are so stuck in our darkness because there's shame that hides it, but what if we put it all out there and then we're met with a God who says, "Son, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." What if darkness wasn't the enemy? It was hiding in the darkness that was. What if he wanted us to shine? Even in the brokenness, even in the pain, even in the chaos, he wanted to invite us to be people of light. But it's a choice. Joy is a choice. To say, I am going to pursue, and it's not easy. I'm not sure that it gets easier. Joy is a choice to stay put even when all we want to do is hide back. Joy is a choice to say, I know that God has been in my past, is currently with me in the present, and he's going to take care of my future. Joy is a choice to say, I'm going to let others in on what's really going on in my world, because then maybe a little bit of light can crack through and God can call me his own. We get to be people of light. We will face darkness. Psalm 23, when I walk through the darkest valley, you are with me. John 16 talks about how Jesus is warning them that he's about to go die, and he says, you will have grief, you will have pain, you will have weeping. But then he doesn't stop there. In fact, he continues. At the end of that chapter, he says these words. He says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world, you will have trouble. Guys, we will have trouble. We will have darkness. We will have bad days, weeks, months, years. He says, but take heart. I have overcome the world. He's got us. And sometimes on our darkest days, someone telling me, it's all right, he's going to take care of the future, it's all going to make sense one day, doesn't feel great. But knowing that I get to live in victory right now, regardless of what comes tomorrow, helps me hold on to just the littlest bit of flicker in the darkest moments. But it's a choice. We have to find it. We have to pursue it. Even for me, I can tell you I've had seasons in my life that are incredibly dark, but I think my problem in those seasons is actually that I'm closing my eyes. And God had answers all around me, but I wasn't willing to see them. Find the flicker. Stay in the light and become the light. Why? Because there's a whole slew of people out in the world who need you to show them what the light looks like. We get to become these beacons on a hill. We get to become lighthouses that guide people who are also in dark places into the comfort and into the love of a God who calls them son and daughter. We get to become the kinds of people, but the only way we can do that is if we choose to live this out. We choose to say yes to him. Because joy is living like there's light, even when we don't see it, even when we don't feel it. Joy is living like there's light. I had a student. He eventually became my intern after the course of this crazy year of his life. And he was a senior, going into his senior year. We went on a mission trip together, and we came back, and he was on fire, right? Like, I'm going to change the world. And you believed him because he was on fire. There was a lot of light to this dude. And he comes back from this trip, and he goes through band camp, because that's what you do when you get back from all your trips. So sorry to all of you that are about to do band camp. You got this, okay? He comes back, and he's ready to live out his senior year with boldness and with bravery and with pizzazz. But instead, in August, he would experience one of the darkest months of his life. This girlfriend that really, truly, he thought he'd eventually marry, broke up with him. That same week, one of his best friends betrayed him. And then about a week later, he gets a phone call at school, and he gets picked up from school and driven to the hospital, where he sat in a room with his family as people talked about how his dad had unexpectedly passed away. The first month of his senior year. I remember, because I was in the room, I remember looking at this family and looking at this student thinking, there's no way he makes it through this well. Shame on me. Because that's so much darkness to hold. And it wasn't easy. It's not like he was happy, right? This isn't a happy situation. And yet he chose every morning to fight the battle between joy and darkness. And it wasn't an easy battle for him to fight. And yet he did every single day. He got up and he started to surround himself with people who also were light, so that they could remind him on his worst days that you're not alone, that you have people that are with you. And he starts sharing this light over and over and over again. And I remember we all, at the end of the year, he had prom, senior prom, and he was getting ready for it. And he was excited, but also there's this grief every time you do something without your dad, without the girlfriend. But he asked a couple of us to go to Taco Bell with him. And so we did. Yay, Taco Bell for prom. But we went to Taco Bell, and I remember looking at him, and you can see it. There's pain, because he wishes it was his girlfriend or his dad sitting next to him. But he was still surrounded by light. And he was joyful, even in the darkness, to the point that he started sharing all of this joy with the cashier. He took a picture with this cashier, and he's just holding this guy, and he's like, ah! Like, so much joy. You would never know by looking at him, but for him, he knew where the light came from. It wasn't dependent on happiness or situations. It was Jesus. And even at 17, 18 years old, he held on to it, and he has every day since. You see, we get to be those people that walk into a Taco Bell and make somebody else's day. Maybe not in a prom outfit, okay? But what if we live like this? How much would that change our world? We're going to sing a song, and the song talks about how we trust that God is working even when we don't see it, even when we don't feel it. We know God is working. But during this song, I want to invite you. We have glow sticks up here. I'm a big fan of glow sticks, okay? But we have glow sticks up here, and I want to invite you to respond. And there's two different responses that I have, okay? If you're someone who's been in darkness, and whether you've been closing your eyes or your world is so disoriented that you can't figure out which way's up, or you've been so cynical that this Jesus thing may not actually be it, I want you to come, and I want you to grab a glow stick, and I want you to go back to your seat, and I want you to go to him, talk to him. I want you to grab this as a reflection of the light that he has for you, as a flicker of hope that he has for you. And this isn't some magical glow stick, okay? It's a moment that you get to mark as the moment you said yes to the light that Jesus has for you, even if it's just a flicker. Then I also want to invite some of you up. Maybe you've seen some darkness. Maybe you're in it, but you want to live like people of light. You want to be a beacon for people that are dark. You want to be a lighthouse in a very dark sea for someone else. I want you to come and grab that. And when we sing, I just want you to hold it up, saying, I got you. So that the people around you know that you're with them, that you're caring for them. People, if you're going to hold this up and you see someone else struggling, stop and actually pray for them. Share that love with them. But I want to invite you, either come grab that flicker and choose it. Choose joy. Or be ready to be a beacon for other people. Can I pray for you? God, we need you. We know that you are hope and you are light. But more than that, we know that we get to live in that now, even when we don't feel it, even when we don't see it, even when we don't understand it, and we know that you are still there. And so God, right now, will you show up as just a flicker of light to some people who have been in dark spaces? Will you give them a sense of your presence? God, for some of us maybe who have seen some darkness and are ready to be bold enough to stand in that light, to show it to other people, God, will you give us courage to live this out just a little bit differently, to become the light in a dark place for others. God, we love you. We need you. And we trust that you are here, even if we don't understand it. And right now, God, we sing, we praise in joy.